the U.S. government gives different reasons for why the drone strikes are necessary, and so there are three justifications for this war: that the war in Afghanistan has spilled over into Pakistan, or that the U.S. is assisting an internal war within Pakistan, and both those justifications just fail because the groups that they're allegedly targeting aren't entirely involved in the conflict in Afghanistan, and the Pakistani government is targeting totally different groups than the U.S. government is targeting. So that creates a problem because you can't wage a war without a justification. You can't use lethal force if there's no war already going on, or you're not defending yourself. You're not doing it to defend yourself. And so the U.S. government constantly says this is in self-defense, but we all know that the Iraq War was entered on the premise of self-defense, and that was an extremely attenuated way of viewing self-defense. The other issue is that in order to engage in war and not to be held liable for war crimes, you have to engage with groups that are organized properly, that have the ability to you can't bomb 20 criminals, right? That's not what the laws of wars are intended to govern. They're meant to govern mass military offenses, and so the U.S. is in clear violation of international law when it bombs groups that barely amount to a military force, right? And it's also further, it doesn't amount to a military force, and there's no direct connection to an existing armed conflict. So, what we often forget is that at the Nuremberg trials, the biggest charge against the Nazis was crimes of peace, crimes against the peace, and crimes of aggression, right? It was the use of force when you weren't allowed to use force. So the Holocaust, genocide were obviously the most atrocious charges, but how did that take place? What the crime that allowed that to take place was the unlawful use of force, and that's currently what the U.S. can be held accountable for, is using force when there is against groups that could not be parties to an armed conflict, should be treated as if they were criminals, not as a military force, and is doing so under false premises, right? They're neither connected to the war in Afghanistan entirely, and they're not connected to an ongoing war that the Pakistani government is itself launching. The legal framework, I think, is interesting because that's the way in which people, activists in Pakistan, lawyers in Pakistan, and lawyers in America have tried to challenge drone warfare. I think people are aware, Al-Awlaki, the man who was killed in Yemen earlier a couple of months ago, there was the NSA leaked his name in 2010 that he was on a kill list, and the Center for Constitutional Rights brought a lawsuit challenging that because he was a U.S. citizen. And so similar lawsuits are now taking place, both to challenge drone strikes in Yemen, but also to challenge drone strikes in Pakistan under this same premise that there's no armed conflict. This person does not pose an imminent threat to the U.S. And so there's a lawyer in Pakistan, his name is Shehzad Akbar. He's assembled a group of people to go into the tribal areas, document this firsthand, take pictures of victims and the after effects, and then he's filed a lawsuit against John Rizzo, who was a CIA operative in Pakistan who signed off on these death warrants, and he said very proudly, how many law professors get to say that they signed off on a death warrant very proudly, so Mr. Akbar has, this is some of the work that he's going on and he's doing, and Reprieve has also done that as well. So, yeah.
Do we want to open this up to questions now? Thank you, John, you can help us with
that? You've answered one of the questions that I had about the legality underlying the drone strikes. But you did not go enough into depth about the legal underpinnings and how would you, or how the professor that you named, how does he intend to enforce any action against the U.S.?
Sure. So what he's filed is a warrant for John Rizzo, and he's filed a warrant in Pakistani courts, and he's using international law norms and just local Pakistan, domestic law to get John Rizzo in court, and then he would be held accountable for wrongful death, murder, homicide. There'd be both, a tort element and a criminal element.
Does that seem likely?
No, of course not. He'll have diplomatic immunity. But I mean, part of all of these cases, all these cases against drone strikes, these are a way to get attention, right, and to show the law is not on their side. And also just points out, in the U.S. when this takes place, kind of the way in which the judicial branch has just completely been captured by the executive and its fear-mongering. And similarly, Pakistan, the judiciary, we have a very progressive Chief Justice right now, and he's taken he's taken motions by himself to get information in front of him. Whether the U.S. Pakistan is sacrificing its people at the service of empire, and so the likelihood of this happening politically is, of course, limited.
I've been asked to keep it stacked, so I got Tom, and did you have your hand up, Tom, too? Tom?
The argument, if I understand it correctly, that the United States uses for this drone program that does not officially exist, is that it is the purpose of it, and the drone attacks specifically in Pakistan are said to be focused on the Taliban militants, who may be Afghani citizens, if there's a citizenry there at all, etc. And so the argument offered, they often point to the somewhat dubious position of the ISI, I think it is, that's the, which has officers who are said to cooperate with the Taliban, etc. How true that is, I don't know. But you didn't mention that specifically, because that is the rationale. And along with that, it seems to me, this is no justification, but it seems to me that a drone program is almost, once you have the given fact of a war, a drone program seems to be almost a logical extension. Mm-hmm. When you fight a war, you want to minimize your own casualties and inflict maximum casualties, even if they include civilians, etc. And that would be a rationale for, well, if we're going to have to fight this crappy war, let's do it with minimum casualties for ourselves, and that is the rationale behind the drone thing. Many of those drones are actually activated, by computer in Virginia, something like that. Right. So,
to address the second point, which I think I should have been a bit more clear. The point is that there's a war in Afghanistan, right? And so you can target legally groups in Pakistan, so long as they're actively participating in a war in Afghanistan. So if you're using the rationale that there's a spillover, the war has spilled over into Pakistan. If you're using that rationale, then you can only target those groups that are actively involved in the war in Afghanistan, right? And so
even if they're spending their nights in Pakistan.
Right. You can under the laws of war, which is just absolutely just a floor, right? I mean, ethical concerns are, that the laws of war are just, what states are obliged to do, but hopefully we would impose greater demands on our state. So the Haqqani network is one group which operates in Pakistan and that controls a substantial part of the eastern region of Afghanistan. Its bases in South Waziristan and Miranshah. So that is one group. They're not a Taliban group, but they are, for all intents and purposes, control an entire region of Afghanistan. And so drone strikes do target them. But there's Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and Al-Qaeda in Yemen and in Afghanistan have absolutely nothing to do with each other, right? It's just an ideological, right? So it's an ideological alignment, right? And so there's about 100 to 150 people who are part of Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. You can't target them. You can target, under the laws of war. Because mere membership in Al-Qaeda doesn't mean that so Al-Qaeda membership in Afghanistan doesn't mean that you are part of the military campaign in Afghanistan, because of the way Al-Qaeda is very loosely formed. It's a loose network. So then the other group targeted is Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. That has no, their only focus, so it's an umbrella group, right? So first of all, it's an umbrella group, it's a network. The looser the network, the less you cannot be a party to an armed conflict, because you're nominally together, right? It's not like you could enforce discipline through the ranks, and that's one of the core legal requirements to be a party to an armed conflict. So, and they're not involved in the war in
So
Afghanistan.
are you saying that to the degree that a drone attack targets the Haqqani network, whatever they're called, who pretty much admit that, they strike from Pakistan in Afghanistan and their purpose is to inflict maximum damage on, NATO forces or whatever. Are you suggesting that there's a different legality there?
Of course.
Okay.
Because it
Because
depends on
you didn't
who.
mention that specifically.
I'm sorry.
And how does the ISI fit to that whole thing?
The ISI is a part of the Pakistan intelligence
Right.
group, and so there are alleged links between the ISI and Haqqani network, which dates to when Afghanistan was captured, when the Soviets were kicked out by
Right.
by the Taliban. Haqqani was central in that, and so Pakistan obviously